Any thoughts on that?
Again, that's a matter of speculation. But there will be great natural disasters, and there will be a third world war. And what is most interesting in this regard is there will be events in the church that will precede these major catastrophes that will take place all over the world. So we have to keep our eyes on what will happen in the church, and what is foretold in the Secret of Fatima about that is beginning to happen already. So we know, as Malachi Martin spoke of, prominent in the Third Secret, he spoke of Russia and Ukraine, and we see events are heating up in Russia and Ukraine. He said about these purported secrets, texts that had been published in the early 1960s, they were written by people who had received either first-hand or second-hand knowledge of the content of the secret, but what they revealed was not actually the secret itself, but elements of the secret were there. And he said they leave out the central element of the secret. And the central element of the secret, he referred to it himself when he was asked, would you violate your oath and reveal the secret? And he said, under one condition I would, and that is if there would take place the total collapse at the center, meaning the center of Catholicism, the center of Christianity, with the church in Rome. And that is beginning to happen. Bergoglio has summoned this Synod on Synodality, and what is taking place is going to be a constitutional change in the church. They will simply say that it's going to be reforms, that these are reforms that are taking place. But it's contrary to the very essential nature of the church as professed to be the divine constitution of the church. It cannot be changed. So if such changes are made, those will not be a change in the church. That will be a defection from the church. Those who instigate these changes and those who participate in them and go along with them and become part of this changed church are actually defecting from the Catholic Church and forming a new church, a rival church, which is a counterfeit church. And that is exactly what Bergoglio is doing.
Okay. Father Kramer. Yes, Father Kramer, 1 second. We have to take a short break, just a couple of minutes. We'll be right back. The counterfeit church, I want to pursue this. So how much of a counterfeit church do we already have? And what is the chance of restoring the original and legitimate papacy in Rome? All right, we'll be right back with Father Paul Kramer in just a minute. Hold on. All right, Father Paul Kramer is our guest here, and we're talking about the falsehoods that have surrounded the papacy in the Vatican now under this Bergoglio from Argentina. And you're talking about a new bogus church being set up. Would that new bogus church be the one operating under Bergoglio out of the Vatican now, or are you looking for it to be set up in some other headquarter, perhaps? And if it is set up somewhere else, or if it's still at the Vatican, what are we going to see to oppose it? That's kind of a two-question series there.
Yeah, well, the first part of the question I can answer, yes, it is operating out of the Vatican under Bergoglio. Mm-hmm. And yes, this is the central part of the Third Secret of Fatima that has not been publicized. Now, Cardinal Ratzinger, Pope Benedict XVI, back in 1984, mentioned these eschatological, these end-time events. In private, he spoke to one of his seminary professors who's about 95 years old, or even older now, I think, 97 or 8 or something like that. I met him in Bavaria back in 2005. His name is Dr. Ingo Dollinger. He's been a priest for more than 60 years. He knew Padre Pio, Saint Pio of Pietrelcina very well. He told me he had gone to confession 58 times to Padre Pio.
Huh.
He's a very close friend of Pope Benedict XVI. And Pope Benedict revealed to him that in the Third Secret, it speaks of an evil council. There will be an evil council. And that the secret warns not to make changes in the Mass. This matches exactly what Cardinal Stritch had said in 1957 about the secret. There would be a movement soon. He said, not today or tomorrow, but soon there will be a movement by stages will abolish the celebration of the Mass. So the Mass will be abolished. And the reforms that Bergoglio intends to make in the Mass with this coming synod will fulfill that prophecy. Cardinal Ratzinger said it corresponds to what was written in the Scripture, and that corresponds to what is foretold by the prophet Daniel when the daily sacrifice will cease. The sacrifice he's referring to is the same one that the prophet Malachi in the last book of the Old Testament is referring to, that clean oblation which is offered from the rising to the setting of the sun throughout the whole world. The Mass, of course, is the unbloody renewal of the sacrifice of Jesus Christ on the cross. And that will be abolished. Now, there will be a counterfeit pope, and that is in the Third Secret. I asked Malachi Martin about that. I said, in my research about the message of Fatima and the secret, I've come to the conclusion that the secret reveals that there will be a false pope, an anti-pope, who will be a heretic. And Malachi confirmed that to me and replied, were it only that. There are prophecies of a counterfeit church. Notably, Blessed Anne Catherine Emmerich, beatified by Pope John Paul II, spoke of the false pope and the false counterfeit church. And we see that coming into being now under Bergoglio. Now, what he's doing, he made changes in canon law. That was in the last couple of years. And just in the last few days, he's made some more changes in canon law to decentralize the church, to make it more regionally governed and not by the central authority of the Pope. Now, this is directly going to be contrary to the, when it goes into force, what he eventually plans to do is to completely decentralize the church in such a manner that the papacy will become a figurehead. And this is actually foretold by the 12th century Saint Hildegard of Bingen, when she said that the national hierarchies would be the ones that would be preferred to the governance of the Pope. So it's been foretold that long ago. They will still call it the Catholic Church, but it will not be the Catholic Church. It will be a counterfeit church. And the Pope will be a counterfeit Pope. And that man is Bergoglio, and he is carrying out what is foretold in those prophecies, which is a reformation of the church, which is, in fact, a defection from the church. It's going to create a rival counterfeit church, and that's what Bergoglio intends to do, and what he's going to do with this synod, which should terminate next year. And he's making all kinds of statements which indicate a completely new doctrine, which is at variance with Christian morality, that this will be the moral code, the code of ethics of his false church. It will not be anything that we would find to be coherent or in agreement with the sacred scriptures or with what all Christianity has represented for the last 2,000 years. I say not just of the Catholic Church, but anyone who believes in the Bible will understand that this new church in Rome is a monstrosity, and it is not something of Jesus Christ or of God. So that is the central element of the third secret, and it is that apostasy that is referred to in the second letter of the Apostle Paul to the Thessalonians, when he refers to the apostasy that will take place. And Sister Lucia dos Santos, she spoke of the book of the Apocalypse. If you want to understand what is in the Third Secret of Fatima, it corresponds to what is in the book of Apocalypse, the book of Revelation, that is, which she specified, I think, chapter 7 to 12 or 7 to 13. My memory is a bit vague on that, what that includes, 13 or not. But it's chapter 7 to 13, I think, or 7 to 12. It doesn't really matter because there's a great overlap between what's in 12 and 13. They're covering the same events, just from a slightly different perspective, but it's the same events. That is the signal event when you see a change in the Mass. Again, they're not going to say, we are forbidding the Mass. This is not going to be like the days of the Reformation when the Mass was forbidden.
Okay.
And they outlawed specifically, explicitly, what was outlawed was the Mass. The Catholic Mass is forbidden. They aren't going to say it like that. They're going to come out with a new ritual, and they're going to call it the Mass. So they're not going to say, they're going to say, we've made some reforms in the liturgy, is what they will say.
Okay.
And but these reforms in the liturgy are going to be such that this new rite will not be the Mass. It will be something different. They will say, like they said after Vatican II, introducing the new rite of Mass of Paul VI, and the propaganda that kept coming out of the Vatican was, well, nothing has really changed. It's the same as before. And, of course, if it were the same as before, why were they so strictly forbidding the old rite of Mass if it's really not at all different than the new one?
Got it.
But they were insisting all over the world in the various chancery offices. The directors were coming out saying that the changes have been decreed from Rome and you're to abandon the old rite. And I remember back in the early 70s, I asked the pastor of one of our parishes, a man who had worked in the Vatican, I said, well, what document from Rome has suppressed and forbidden? Because he told me, haven't you heard it's been forbidden? I said, well, what document forbids it? And he just remained silent at that point. And, of course, this was the fraud. There's a precedent of fraud. This fraud began in 1969. The first changes in the liturgy took place in 1965. They started making changes by stages. But then they introduced the new rite in 1967, the new missal in 1969. It became implemented throughout the church in 1970. And even Pope Paul VI, not in an official manner, but off the record, he said the new Mass is not optional, it's obligatory. Again, what is the legal basis for making it obligatory? There is none. And I wrote articles about that, and I spoke about this back in 1989, 1990, 1991, and the years after that. Cardinal Stickler's secretary was a man by the name of Gregor Hesse. Father Hesse worked in the Vatican Secret Archive for a while, and he was one of the secretaries of Cardinal Stickler. And he told me that there had been a commission of cardinals, 9 cardinals, who had examined the question, and that it was unanimously judged by the commission of cardinals that the old rite of Mass had never been suppressed, and that the priest still has the right to use that old rite of Mass. Finally, Cardinal Stickler came out in public after I had published the articles and made it known far and wide that there had been this commission of cardinals. Cardinal Stickler came out and said, yes, there was a commission of 9 cardinals. He named the members of the commission, and he said, I know this is true because I was one of those cardinals. I was a member of the commission. Then, after John Paul II died, Cardinal Ratzinger, who was one of those 9 cardinals on the commission, was elected Pope. And in 2007, he issued the Motu Proprio Suborum Pontificum, and there he stated that the old rite of Mass had never been suppressed, and consequently it has always been the right of the priests to use that old missal. So there's the precedent. There is the fraud. Those who constructed the new missal, who fabricated the new rite, in their writings, in their books and articles, they were very plain about it, saying that this is not the Roman rite anymore. This is a new rite. It's a completely new rite. But officially, what Catholics were told was a lie. They were told this is a revision of the Roman rite, and nothing has really changed. It's just trying to pacify people and accept the new rite. And it was revealed in 1957 by Cardinal Stritch that there would be the movement in the Church by stages, would bring about the abolition of the Mass. That began with what Cardinal Ratzinger referred to as the evil council in the Third Secret, the evil council, warning against changing the Mass, and it would eventually result in the abolishing the Mass. The Mass will be replaced with a new rite that will be a phony Mass, a counterfeit Mass. It will not affect the bringing about of the change of the transubstantiation, which is the substance of the sacrifice of the Mass. That making present the body and blood of Jesus Christ on the altar will not take place with the new rite that is going to be introduced. It's going to be a fraud, but they will say nothing has really changed, that it's the Mass, but it will not be a Mass. It will be a counterfeit. It will be a fraud.
It's going to be rewritten, in other words, to purvey a different meaning. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Are we talking about satanic influences here directly?
Definitely. Again, Cardinal Stritch saying the same thing as is in those purported texts of the secret, which contain elements of the secret, and the people who wrote these purported contents of the Third Secret had access to the Third Secret. And one of those famous Third Secret editions was published in a newspaper called Neues Europa, a German language newspaper. And it spoke of the followers of the devil taking possession of the highest positions of the Church. Now, this sounds exactly like what Cardinal Stritch had said was in the secret when it was read in his presence by Pope Pius XII, that the followers of Satan, the followers of the devil, will gain complete power in the Church, and they're going to abolish the Mass. But he also said they will gain power over all of the governments of the world. So this is the new world order that George Bush Sr. Said was high on the political agenda. The new world order that we want to bring into the world, that they want to bring into the world, that it's been excoriated as a conspiracy theory by the liberal press for decades and decades. But as a matter of fact, have they been very open about it? Now they call it the Great Reset. Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum.
Yeah. Yep.
But it is the very substance of what is going to take place in the world, the very substance of the Third Secret of Fatima, one of the great punishments that God will allow to take place in the world. The events that will signal that these things are about to happen are when we see in the Church a change in the constitution of the Church, when we see the pontifical papal church, the monarchical church, centrally governed by the Pope in Rome, to be replaced by a church that is governed by bishops' conferences. And when we see yet a new version of the Mass, which will be a total counterfeit, that will be a total betrayal of 2,000 years of dogma and tradition of the Catholic Church. And that is what Bergoglio intends to bring about. And he said to the former Superior General of the Jesuits, Adolfo Nicolas, when he went to Manila, to the Philippines, he spoke there with the former Superior General of the Jesuits.
Okay.
And he said in an interview, he made a public interview, saying that Bergoglio told him that he doesn't intend to finish his pontificate, doesn't intend to leave, like if he were going to resign, not until his reforms are irreversible.
Huh. Well, they're not playing games.
And these are the reforms. A change in the constitution of the church, which is a defection from the church, and a change in the Mass, which will affect the abolition of the Mass.
Okay.
And that will signal the global events. The global catastrophes will follow after those events in the church.
So we're on a pretty short fuse.
Yes.
Yes? Yeah. All right.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. World War is a distinct possibility very soon. The natural disasters are already certainly showing signs of being underway. We'll see. It's going to be...
Pandemics that will wipe out entire nations overnight.
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised. We'll talk to you next time. We appreciate the insights. Take care and be well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Father Paul Kramer, an insider on the real Vatican. So you're getting first-hand data.